Hey everyone, welcome to this series of videos on Spring Boot 3. So we have covered one of the very interesting features, that is the support for Java 17 and all the Java 17 features in our first video. In this video, we're going to talk about the problem details class in Spring Boot 3. Now, in order to understand why do you need this problem details, let's think of generating an error. So we know how to handle exception in a Spring Boot project. So let me do one thing. Let me write a code that might generate or that might lead to an exception, right? So I'll make some changes, and here whenever you're saying a say hi, let's consider you're also going to pass a name here, right? So let's pass this name as a path variable. Let's do one thing here. We'll just write user, and what we are going to do here, say hi, and we'll take the user string user. We can also write the path variable annotation here, right? Path variable. Cool. So let's consider this path variable that we are taking as a user. It's going to throw some exception in certain scenarios, right? So username will validate this username, and if this username is not following certain pattern, so we will return some error, right? So let's consider the username should contain only A to Z, right? I mean the A to Z alphabets, not any numbers. And if it has any numbers in it or digits in it or any special characters in it, so it should throw an exception. So what we can do here, let's write, we can create pattern dot matches, and what we are going to create a regex here. Let's create a regex which needs A to Z, or in uppercase A to Z, and should be any number, one or more number. That's cool. And what we'll write here, if we can just write boolean test equal this, right? So next what we'll do, we'll check if not test, then we'll throw some exception, throw new, let's consider runtime exception we are going to throw, and we might write here invalid user name. Cool. So let's run this code and let's see what happens when we are going to our postman and say hi and say Rahul here, and let's execute this code, and we got it. Hey there, Spring Boot 3 has Java 17 support. But let's write something Rahul, rather than Rahul, I'll write Rahul 123, and if I send this, we are definitely getting an error. So rather than showing this, I want to change the status code to here right now you can see it is 500. I want to change it to 400, which is a bad request, and some of the other things. I want to change the pattern of this. I want to reduce the number of items that we are returning as a response. So what we can do for this, the simple technique that we had, we will create a DTO class. We can just write a new class, and we can create something called error response. Again, this is not a default name, you can give any name, doesn't matter. So error response, I'm creating a DTO class here, and what we can do, we can write all the things that we want, right? Apart from this, as we know Java 17 features, so rather than using a class, we can change it to a record, and which can make things easier for us. So in this, let's consider what and all things we want, right? So if you look at the standard message here, we can find that we have something called timestamp, status, error, message, and path. Let's create timestamp, so we can just consider a local date time timestamp, right? We can create, apart from this, what else we can create? We can have status error, so we can just write status, which is an integer. Then we can have an error string error. Then we can just write string message, and we can have a path, right? So we can just write string path, right? So I'll write it in 2 lines so that you can see this, right? So we have created a record rather than creating a class. Now what we can do here, we can create an exception handler so that we can give a desired response along with our desired status code, right? Let's create a new class here, and we can keep it in error handler, right? So I've created a package called error handler, and over here I'm just creating some name, some app error handler, app error handler. Okay, now let's click on finish. So what we will do, the first thing, we already know that this class has to be annotated with @rest controller advice, and over here we can create error handler, right? So first of all, I'll create a method called public, which is going to return my error response record, and we can just write handle, which error handle invalid value error. Okay, so right now what is happening, the exception which is getting generated, we didn't create any of our custom exception, so we are just reusing the runtime exception. So let's just write runtime. You can create your custom exception for this, and you can throw the custom exception. For time being, I'm just using a runtime exception here, and also I'll just make use of the HTTP servlet request object to get the path of the request. Fine. So let's make it smaller so that you can see it. Okay, so what I've created, a simple method which is returning main object of error response, and wherein we are passing the runtime exception class as an argument, and also we have passed the HTTP servlet request object. Now what we are going to do here, we are going to mark this as an exception handler, and it's going to handle what kind of exception? It's going to handle the runtime exception. So we can just write runtime exception dot class. That's pretty much all, and then we have to give a return, right? So we can just create an object of the record, that is error response equal, we can pretty much decide on status, HTTP status equal HTTP status dot bad request. Done. So what we are going to do right now, there is response, we can just write new error response, and we're going to pass the parameter. So first thing, we'll pass the current system time, so we can just write local date time dot now. Cool. The second, I'll be writing in multiple lines so that it would be easier for you to understand. The second parameter, it needs the status code, right? So we can just write status dot value, so which will return me the status code. The third one, it needs error. So what is the error? It is a bad request, so we can just write status dot reason, get reason phrase, we can just write. That's cool. And then what we want to return is the exception that happened, or the message of that exception, right? So we can just write, we are having ex dot get message, and lastly we need to send the URL path, right? So what we can do here, we can simply write the HTTP servlet request dot get request URI. That's cool, and we can just do that, and at the end we can just write return the response. well. Also on top of this method we can just write @response status, and we can just mention the status code as http status dot bad request. Fine, seems everything is fine. So what we are going to do, the application already is reloaded, so we can just go there. So right now if I do some mistake, if I send this, so I'm getting the response. You can see as per the desired response that I wanted, and also you can see the error that we are getting right now is a bad request. So it has been changed from 500 to 400. So this is how we have been implementing the exception handling in Spring Boot. In Spring Boot 3, we got a new thing called the problem details. Now what problem details does, now you can see the response that we are getting here. It is just that what we wanted. Now it could be, there could be some more details, there could be some less details, right? So whatever the user wants, it would be there, right? There is no standardized class as of Spring Boot 2 that your response should have this properties or this informations. Now problem details solves the problem. In a problem details would be having a class which would be having some common properties. We can also add more properties as we want, but some of the important properties which should be there in a standard error response. Let's look at this. How can we use this? Going here, and what we will do, so we have in this we have used this, and I'm gonna create, I'll keep it here, and I'm gonna create a new one. I'll just comment it out, the existing one, and I'll be creating a new exception handler over here. Now what things we can change here, we can, rather than writing all these things, we will just write, so rather than returning this error response, I'll be returning something called problem detail, and pretty much the same thing. Of herein we are going to pass the same kind of things, and we can remove this as well. We'll just keep it very simple. We are going to pass the runtime exception class here. So we have to create an object of problem details, problem detail. Okay, we can just write PD equal. So how to create a problem details, you have to write problem details. You cannot use a new here. Problem details dot uc for status, and you can pass a status code that you want, right? Or you can also pass an int status code directly. Also we can pass problem status and details, right? So you'll be having both the message that you want to display and the things that you want to use, right? So I'll just do for status, and let's pass the status. What is our status? HTTP status dot bad request, right? Let's do this, and you know what, I don't need this as well, so I'm just doing this, and let's see what we will do. Return, I'm going to return this PD. Okay, so let's save this, and what we will do, I'll go here and let's do the same mistake, and this time you can see we are getting something type, title, status, right? So I'm getting a title bad request, I'm getting a status 400, I'm getting an instance that is a path. You can see here everything is coming here. So this is what problem details is. If at all we need more detailed response, what we can do, we can add certain things to our PD. So we can just write PD dot, you see a lot of properties. You have set status, get status. So let's set something, right? So we want to set a details, right? So we can set the details. So set details, we can just write our exception, already exception all object we are having ex dot, we can just write get message, so we'll get the details, right? So PD dot, we want to set some more things, so we can just write set, and you can find some things. We want to set the status, we want to set the title, we want to set the type. We can also, we want to set some property, we want to introduce some more properties by ourselves, right? So I'm just want to create a new property, right? Let's suppose the time, right? So property name I'm giving as timestamp, and this one we want as local datetime dot now. Okay, cool. And also I want to set a couple of other things, like pd dot set, you can change the instance also. You can give the automatically it gets the URI, you don't need to do anything else apart from that. You want to set a title, you want to change the title, right? So you want to change the title to the exception, the exception that happened, right? So http status dot bad request, right? So we can just write http status dot bad request dot, you can just write get reason phrase, so that you can get the reason phrase here. Okay, so I made these changes, and let's see what happens if I make this request right now. So we can see, look at this, what data we are getting, right? So title is bad request, status is 400, details is invalid username, instance we are getting, and also there is a new thing called timestamp that we have created on the fly, which is having the exact time when the exception occurred. So we can pretty much standardize these things by using the problem details. So from now on, you don't need to create your own class or record for the error responses. Rather, what we can do here, we can use the problem detail class, which is provided by Spring Boot 3. So I hope that you have liked this video, and if you find my videos useful, make sure that you are subscribing to my channel, and also you are sharing to your friends, your colleagues, whoever wants to learn the Spring Boot 3. See you in the next video. Thank you.